The 42nd floor of Merritt Tower smelled like polished concrete and careful lies. Cora Dalton sat across from the man she had married 8 years ago. In the conference room she had designed herself, the one with the floor-to-ceiling windows and the walnut credenza and the skylights she had angled specifically to catch Chicago's pale autumn light. She had sketched this room at 2 in the morning on a cocktail napkin, excited, half drunk, on the idea that she was building something real. Drew Merritt had kissed her forehead and said she was brilliant. That was before. His attorney slid the papers across the glass table. A Mont Blanc pen followed. Drew sat to her left in his charcoal Armani, scrolling through his phone with one thumb like this was a Tuesday morning meeting. Like she was a line item. "It's a clean settlement, Ms. Dalton," his attorney said. The use of her maiden name, already, stung more than she expected. Cora pressed her hand flat against the table to keep it from shaking. 7 months pregnant, alone on her side of the table except for a paralegal she'd hired because she couldn't afford a real attorney yet. Not until Delia Fenn finished her trial in Boston and flew back. Delia had promised to be here. The flight was delayed. The pen felt cold. Drew finally looked up. "Let's not make this dramatic, Cora." She almost laughed. 8 years. His children growing inside her. 2 children. She had found out 3 weeks ago, a fact that still arrived like a second shock every morning. And he was asking her not to make it dramatic. She signed. Her name bled across the signature line like a sentence she would spend years unpacking. Outside, the Chicago River caught the October sun and threw it back in pieces. She found out Drew married Jade Forsyth 11 days later. Not from a phone call, not from a friend. From her phone screen at 6:15 in the morning, sitting in her rented studio in Lincoln Square with a mug of chamomile cooling beside her, scrolling because she couldn't sleep and hadn't been able to for weeks. The alert came from a gossip account she'd forgotten she followed. A photo. Drew in a dove gray suit, Jade in a backless gown, ivory, expensive, the kind that required a team of people to zip. They were laughing beneath a floral archway at some lakefront estate. The caption read, "Real estate visionary Drew Merritt makes it official with brand ambassador Jade Forsyth in intimate Lake Geneva ceremony." Intimate, 11 days. Cora set down the mug. She looked out the window at the street below, where a garbage truck was making its Tuesday rounds, and she thought quietly and very clearly. He had planned this before he ever handed her that pen. Jade Forsyth was 26. She had 1.4 million Instagram followers, and a face that looked like an algorithm had designed it for maximum engagement. She and Drew had appeared at 2 industry events together, while Cora was still wearing her ring, still believing it was a rough patch. The babies kicked at the same time, a simultaneous nudge from inside, as if they too had seen the photo. "I know," she whispered. She pressed both palms against her belly. "I know." She had her first real breakdown at a Jewel Osco on a Tuesday afternoon. It wasn't the glamorous kind, not the cinematic one where you crumple elegantly in the rain. It was the fluorescent-lit grocery store kind, standing in front of the prenatal vitamins section, doing the math on her phone's calculator and realizing she would have to put the omega-3 supplements back. Her account had $214. Rent was due Friday. Her freelance contract with the firm on Michigan Avenue wouldn't pay out until November. She put the omega-3 back. She bought the basic prenatal vitamins and a box of crackers and a carton of orange juice, and she sat in her car in the parking lot for 10 minutes before she trusted herself to drive. Delia called at 4. "I just landed. I saw the photos. I'm coming over." "You don't have to. I'm already in an Uber." Delia Fenn arrived with Vietnamese takeout and a yellow legal pad filled with notes she had apparently been writing on the plane. She was the kind of lawyer who never fully stopped working. The kind who had gotten Cora through a previous landlord dispute and a contract fight with a client in 2 separate jurisdictions, and had charged her almost nothing both times because, she said, that was what best friends were for. "He owes you prenatal medical costs under the spousal support clause," Delia said. Chopsticks paused midair. "And the settlement agreement you signed, I read it on the plane, has a gap." He didn't disclose the Lakeview development correctly. The numbers were wrong. Cora stared at her. "What does that mean?" "It means he may have underdisclosed assets. which means the settlement was based on incomplete information, which means we have grounds to reopen. Delia. Eat your foe. I'm serious, I'm too tired to fight. Delia set down her chopsticks and looked at her with that particular expression she had. The one that cut through sentiment and went straight to the thing underneath. You're not too tired. You're scared. Those are different things. That night, after Delia left, Cora sat at her drafting table, the one piece of furniture she'd kept from the apartment she and Drew had shared on the Gold Coast, and opened her portfolio files. 8 years of work. Residential renovations, a school gymnasium in Bridgeport, 3 proposals for mixed-use developments downtown, and the design that had consumed her last 2 years, the Halsted Street Community Arts Center, a project she had conceived, pitched, and drafted entirely herself. A project Drew had called too idealistic, too civic-minded, not profitable enough. She scrolled through the revision folders, the timestamps. And then, in a folder she hadn't opened since before the divorce, she found something that made her chest go completely still. A file named Merritt Halsted Revised, timestamped 4 months ago, last edited on a device registered to Drew's company account. She opened it. It was her design, her arches, her Lightwell calculations, her community plaza layout, retitled, rebranded, her name removed entirely. Her hand hovered over the mouse for a long moment. Then she opened a new email to Delia and typed, "I need you to call me in the morning. I found something." She met Dr. Nicholas Baird on a Thursday night in November, in the last place she expected to feel anything except fear. The emergency room at Northwestern Memorial was busy, not chaotic, but humming with that particular ER energy, all fluorescent urgency and sneakered efficiency. Cora had come in because the twins had gone quiet for too long. And when you were 30 weeks along and suddenly couldn't feel movement and you were alone, you didn't wait to see if it passed. You went. The triage nurse settled her into a curtained bay and took her vitals, and said the OB resident would be in shortly. Cora lay on her side on the narrow bed, one hand pressed against her belly, eyes on the acoustic tile ceiling, working very hard not to catastrophize. The curtain shifted. A man in navy scrubs appeared. Not young, mid-40s, dark hair silvering at the temples, a stethoscope around his neck and reading glasses, pushed up on his forehead like he'd forgotten they were there. "I'm not your OB, he said immediately, as if he anticipated the confusion. "I'm neurosurgery, Nicholas Baird. I was passing through and the nurse flagged me because you looked like you were about to talk yourself into a panic spiral, and I happen to know what that looks like." Cora blinked. "That's not a standard introduction." "No," he agreed. "Are you here by yourself?" "Yes." He pulled the stool to the side of the bed and sat down with the unhurried ease of someone who had learned long ago that sitting down was the most reassuring thing a physician could do. "Then I'll stay until your OB gets here. Tell me something that has nothing to do with the pregnancy." She stared at him. "What?" "Anything. What do you do?" "I'm an architect." "What are you working on?" She almost told him nothing. It felt too complicated, too raw. But there was something in the way he asked, direct and genuinely curious, that made her answer. "A community arts center. On the north side. I designed it myself." A pause. "Someone stole it." Nicholas Baird looked at her steadily. "That sounds like a different kind of emergency." "Yes," she said, and saying it plainly to a stranger made it real in a way it hadn't been yet. The OB resident arrived 20 minutes later. The twins were fine. "Stress-induced reduced movement," the resident said. "Rest, hydration, no more working until midnight." Nicholas had already left by then, but when Cora gathered her coat and made her way toward the exit, she found a business card tucked into the side pocket of her bag. "Dr. Nicholas Baird, Northwestern Memorial," and below that, in blue ink, "Good luck with the building. It should belong to you." She didn't know why she held on to it. She told herself it was nothing. She had enough to worry about. But that night, for the first time in weeks, she slept without the light on. The letter arrived in December, 3 weeks before her due date. It came in a cream envelope, embossed with Drew's legal team logo. Cora made coffee before she opened it, because she knew whatever was inside would require steadiness. Non-disclosure and settlement revision agreement. The language was precise and carefully laundered. Drew was requesting she sign an additional NDA covering any reference to the Halstead hygiene project, any reference to Merit Development's internal processes, and any public statements about the nature of their marriage. In exchange, a supplemental payment significant enough to cover several months of expenses, maybe a year if she was careful. She read it twice. Then she called Delia. "He knows you found the file," Delia said. "Yes." "He's buying your silence before you figure out what to do with it. Don't tell me to think about it." A pause. "I wasn't going to. I was going to tell you that if you sign this, he keeps the building and the story. Your name disappears from both." Cora was already standing at the kitchen counter with the papers spread flat. She looked at the signature line, the same blankness that had swallowed her once before. Then she picked up the stack and tore it in half. Then again. The pieces fell like confetti onto the linoleum. "I didn't sign it," she told Delia. "I know." She could hear Delia smiling. "I already started pulling the file timestamps. We're going to bury him in metadata." That same evening, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. 6 words. "You should know when you're beaten." Jade. The studied cruelty of reaching for a woman 30 weeks pregnant through an anonymous screen told her everything she needed to know about who Drew Merritt had chosen and what kind of person she was. Cora deleted the message. She looked out the window at the December dark over Lincoln Square, at the light on the snow and the cars moving through their ordinary lives, and thought, not this time. The twins came at 3 in the morning on a Friday in January, 6 weeks ahead of schedule, the way catastrophes sometimes do, all at once, without ceremony, in the middle of an ice storm. Cora woke to contractions already 2 minutes apart. She called 911 with one hand and gripped the headboard with the other and tried to remember every breathing exercise she'd practiced and panic forgotten. The dispatcher stayed on the line. She focused on the dispatcher's voice. She focused on the frost patterns on the bedroom window. The pounding at her door came 4 minutes later. She dragged herself to open it, certain it was the paramedics, and found Nicholas Baird standing in the hallway in a coat dusted with snow, his face open with alarm. "Charlotte called me," he said quickly. His sister, who had grown quietly close to Cora over the past weeks, in the practical way Charlotte did everything. "You weren't answering. I was 2 blocks away." He was already moving, one hand steadying her arm. "The ambulance is 2 minutes out. Let's get you downstairs." She didn't ask how he knew. She was in too much pain and too afraid, and underneath all of that, too relieved to see a face she trusted. In the lobby, waiting for the ambulance, he kept his hand over hers without speaking. The snow came down in sheets beyond the glass doors. His coat was soaked through the shoulders. He hadn't stopped to zip it. At Northwestern, everything accelerated into the particular urgency of preterm twins. 2 surgical teams, 2 sets of monitors. Cora was conscious through most of it, aware of voices, light, the cold pressure of equipment. And then there was a moment when everything went very white and very quiet, and she thought with perfect clarity, "Please." And then 2 voices answered. Small, indignant, terrifyingly alive. She was crying before they brought them to her, a boy and a girl, 6 weeks early, and furious about it. The neonatologist said they were fighters. Cora could see it in their faces. Nicholas appeared at her bedside an hour later. He had not left the hospital. His eyes were bloodshot. He was holding 2 small knit hats, pale yellow and pale green, and he didn't say anything for a moment. "They're beautiful," he said finally. "Both of them." "How did you know to bring hats?" He exhaled quietly. "Charlotte. She's been preparing since October." Cora laughed, a short, broken sound that surprised her. She looked down at the hats in her hands. Then she looked up at him. "Why do you keep showing up?" she asked, not accusatory, genuinely wanting to know. Nicholas looked at her for a long moment. There was something in his face that was careful and honest at the same time. "Because I lost someone," he said quietly. "And I know what it looks like when a person is carrying everything alone. I couldn't fix it then." A pause. "I can show up now." She didn't have a response for that. She pressed one of the small hats between her palms and let the warmth seep in. Outside, Chicago was buried under January. But in that room, with 2 new heartbeats flickering on the monitors, something had quietly shifted. The architecture world heard about the Halsted Street design. In February, the same week, Drew Merritt announced his Lakeview development to the press. Delia had been methodical. She always was. The metadata from Cora's files was irrefutable. Timestamps, version histories, a clear chain of authorship that predated anything Drew's team could claim by 14 months. They filed with the Illinois Attorney General's office and simultaneously retained a firm in the loop with experience in intellectual property theft. Delia had also, quietly, passed the story to a journalist at the Tribune who had been looking for a thread to pull on Drew Merritt for 2 years. The story broke on a Wednesday. Cora was home with the twins when Delia called. "Check your phone," was all she said. The headline: Merritt Development accused of stealing architect's design for high-profile Northside project. Below it, her name, her sketches. The cocktail napkin. Delia had found it, still in a box of Cora's things. Photographed in full detail, Cora's handwriting across the margins, the date visible. Drew's publicist released a statement within the hour, claiming miscommunication and collaboration disputes. It satisfied no one. His investors were already calling. Jade posted nothing. That evening, Drew called Cora directly for the first time since the divorce. His voice was smooth and cold, the same voice he used in 100 boardrooms. "You want to burn everything down." "I want what's mine," she said. "You think anyone will hire an architect whose name is in a legal dispute?" She looked across the living room at the 2 bouncy seats where her children were sleeping, their fists curled against their cheeks. "Ask me again in a year," she said, and hung up. 3 months of courtrooms, depositions, and late-night strategy sessions followed. Drew's legal team painted him as a collaborator whose contributions had been minimized. They called Cora unstable, difficult, prone to exaggeration. Delia called their first witness, a former Merritt Development project manager, who testified, under oath, that Drew had explicitly ordered Cora's name removed from internal documentation before the project was pitched to investors. Then she played a voicemail. Drew's voice, unmistakable and unguarded. "She'll never know what hit her. She's too busy feeling sorry for herself to look at the files." The courtroom was very quiet. The settlement came 4 weeks later. Merritt Development relinquished all rights to the Halsted Street project. The design credit reverted entirely to Cora Dalton. The licensing fee was significant. Drew's Lakeview deal collapsed under the scrutiny that followed, and a class action from a former business partner emerged the next month. And after that, the story became too large and too documented for even his lawyers to contain. He issued a public statement in August. 4 sentences. The last one read, "I acknowledge that the Halsted Street design was conceived and executed by Cora Dalton, and I regret that my actions did not reflect that truth." Cora read it once. She set her phone face down on the drafting table of her new studio, a bright windowed space in Wicker Park she shared with 2 other architects, which was everything she'd wanted for years. Outside, the summer street was loud with ordinary life. She didn't feel triumph. She felt something quieter and stranger, the particular lightness of a weight she had been carrying so long she'd forgotten it was there. She and Nicholas didn't name what they were for a long time. It grew the way things grow when nobody is performing for anyone, slowly, in the margins, in the spaces between the practical things. He came by on Sunday mornings with coffee and sat on the floor with the twins. He fixed the cabinet hinge Cora had been meaning to fix for 3 months. She brought dinner to the hospital on nights when she knew his shift ran late, and they ate in the small residence lounge and talked about everything, except the thing neither of them had said yet. Charlotte told Cora, with her characteristic directness, that her brother had not eaten a real Sunday breakfast with anyone since his wife died 4 years ago. Cora filed that away and said nothing. It was October, a year almost exactly from the divorce. When Nicholas came to the studio on a Tuesday afternoon without warning, he stood in the doorway with his hands in his coat pockets and looked at her across the room with an expression she didn't have a word for. "I keep almost saying something," he said, "and then I don't because I've been careful for a long time." Careful felt safer. He paused. "I don't want to be careful anymore." Cora set down her pencil. The afternoon light came through the studio windows at the angle she had loved since they'd moved in. The same quality of light she tried to build into every room she'd ever designed. She thought about the conference room on the 42nd floor, and the pen in her hand, and the way she had signed her name like a door closing. She thought about an ERR curtain sliding open, and a man who sat down without being asked. "You could just say the thing," she told him. He almost smiled. "I love you. I love your kids. I love the way you argue with contractors, and the way you eat cereal standing up, and the way you explain to my sister why a building can have a personality." He exhaled. "And I know the timing of all of this is not what either of us planned." "No," she agreed. "But I think we're past the point where timing is the main concern." She crossed the room and stopped in front of him and looked up at his face, which she had memorized by now. The lines at the corners of his eyes, the way he looked at her like she was something to be trusted rather than managed. "Ask me what I want," she said. He asked. "This," she said, "exactly this." They married on a Saturday in March in the studio, which was the only space that felt true enough. Charlotte arranged lilies and hyacinths on every surface. Delia wore heels she complained about all afternoon and cried anyway. The twins sat in matching gray onesies and a double stroller and regarded the ceremony with the specific skepticism of one-year-olds who have opinions about everything. There were 9 people, no photographers, no press release. When Nicholas slid the band onto Cora's finger, plain white gold, engraved on the inside with 3 words, "Show up anyway," she looked at her children and then at the man beside her and felt the singular clarity of a life reordered around things that were real. Later, at the dinner Delia squeezed into her Bucktown apartment, someone put on a playlist and the twins fell asleep on a blanket pile in the corner. And Cora stood at the window with a glass of wine watching snow come down over the rooftops. Delia appeared beside her. "You look like you're thinking something enormous." "I'm thinking about how different it feels," Cora said. "When you choose something that actually fits." Delia clinked her glass against Cora's. "To not settling. To not settling." The Halsted Street Community Arts Center opened the following September. Cora stood in the main hall an hour before the doors opened, the building quiet around her. And she listened to it the way she always listened to a finished building. For the sound of the space working, for the hum of air and light doing what she'd asked of them. The arches she had drawn on a napkin years ago rose above her exactly as she'd imagined. The skylights caught the morning at the right angle. The community plaza outside was already filling with people who would use it for decades without ever knowing her name, and that was fine. That was the point. Nicholas found her there. He stood beside her without speaking, which was one of the things she loved most about him. "It worked," she said quietly. "It was always going to work," he said. "You built it right." She leaned into him and looked up at the light moving across the ceiling, and thought of all the rooms she had survived. And the difference, which she understood now, was everything, between building something and being built by it. From outside came the sound of Chicago doing what Chicago always does, moving, loud, indifferent, alive. And for the first time in longer than she could clearly remember, it sounded exactly like welcome.